But I can remember when I was probably 4, we had a Shetland pony, and he was stubborn. Don't ever get a Shetland pony. But whenever we would go riding, Dad would have to put him on a lead, which was humiliating because nobody else in the family was on a lead. And I asked Dad, can't I, when do I get off the lead? And he said, when you can keep him out of the alfalfa fields. That chance.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go out the driveway, all of us, and I'd be on, I would not be on a lead. I was a big girl. And then we'd go by an alfalfa field. He'd go in there, and I couldn't get him out. And Dad always cut me a switch off the poplar tree. You have to show him who's boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I kick, my feet were probably out like that, and I pull, and he had a mouth, an iron mouth. Nothing moved him. I was only 4, for heaven's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dad would come in and put the lead on, and out we'd go. And I remember that vividly. I can even smell the alfalfa right now.
Mm-hmm.
That damn horse. And I never did get him out of the fields. Our property ran adjacent to a 20-acre piece that was a polo field. And I have memories of that as a child at the polo field. And there was no boundary between our property. We could go out the back of our property and be at the polo field. And every Sunday, free for whatever, there were polo games, and people could drive their cars in and park and watch the polo game. And there was Dad used to do the broadcasting for him, which is kind of. And I can remember as a kid, I think I got a quarter for keeping score. There was a scoreboard, and that was the cheapest job at the polo field. If you were at the end zones to wave a flag if the ball went through the posts, up if it was a goal and down if it wasn't, then we got more money, probably 50 cents. And the real money was in cooling the horses.
Oh, okay.
But you had to that was my older sister who did that, because I was too little. Yeah, just like our property eventually, after my father died, became apartment houses. The polo field became apartment houses. And that polo field was a part of my life clear through until my daughter was born, even after my daughter and my sons were born. Because we used to go out and sit on the sideboards and watch Disneyland fireworks. And when I was in high school, there was a drive-in named Richie's, and it was the primary root beer that they sold. It was Richie's root beer. Yeah, and that was pretty much the only place in Garden Grove. And then there was a McLean's. It was not a drive-in though. It was a restaurant on the corner of Chapman and Harbor. That was, I remember, as being a place.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was a drive-in on Harbor someplace that a lot of us went to, but I can't remember what it was called or anything. Every Tuesday night, you could go up to the gym, and the geometry teacher would open the gym, and you could play badminton. And I think it cost $0.25. And he had rackets there if you didn't have your own racket, and they used the quarters to buy birdies.
Mm-hmm.
And the generations were, there were people, old people to me, now little did I know about old people. And then he would match you up with people to play. And that was a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a girlfriend who could really play badminton, and she and I went up there every Tuesday night. I drove a 35 Ford, which was my Jean, my oldest sister's car, and then my brother's car, and then Helen's car, my next sister, and then I got it, and Dad got it painted when it was my car, which was kind of nice. And that's kind of the way things were then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when my older sister outgrew her winter coat, it went down to my next sister, and I got it. And I never felt deprived about that. That was just, if I liked the coat, I think, oh goody, it's going to be mine. And if I didn't like it, I knew it was going to be mine anyway. But yeah, and I drove that car. I got my license when I was 14, restricted to going to work or on an errand for your folks. But you could always, as my mother informed me, be on an errand to going to the grocery store. And I drove to school. I was not particularly proud of the fact that I had a car. I realized that I had something that my peers did not have. And the reason that I drove it to school was the bus came at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, who feeds the horses before 7 o'clock, eats breakfast and gets ready to go to school?
Mm-hmm.
Not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was driving to school, because I was the one that fed horses and did all that stuff.